What to do, what to do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast, where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendation, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. Lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. If it's a dark and stormy night and you need a drink to warm the depths of your hearts, we at the Brothers on Books go with Encha Matcha, the best matcha for the best brothers. And now our listeners will get 10% off when they use the link or the coupon code in the show notes provided. I'm Alex Allweil, and with me as always is my brother Jack. Jack, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Al. How are you?
I am, it's pretty cold here. It's been a little chilly, chillier than I like it to be, but other than that, I'm doing splendid.
Yeah, it
I
was
guess
28 degrees here today.
Yeah, it was about 30 when I woke up. It warmed up to about 50 when I took my lunch break, but still, like by the time I get off work, it's pretty chilly. I mean, we both just we just got home. We just had Thanksgiving. Both of us just got back. I think you finally are back in your house in Charlotte,
Yep.
away from dirty Myrtle. How does it feel to be back?
Feels, a
Cleaner?
little different. It's nice to have a big old house to roam around in again. Nice big kitchen. But I am missing my daily walks to the beach and dips in the ocean.
That's true. If you I guess if you refilled in your pool, you could still get that cold exposure,
It's
24/7, 365, and you wouldn't have to go to the ocean for it.
it's true.
But I guess with that said, Jack, what book are we doing?
We are reading Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. Um,
We
so
are.
this, so Al, you picked this in the book draft. This was one of your three philosophy books. Uh, what got you interested in this book specifically?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I feel like one, I've been listening to a lot of philosophy. I feel like I listen to a lot of people talk about philosophy on the internet while I work. Uh, And I think usually the opinions I come away with it is it's kind of dumb. Philosophy is a subject. Not necessarily it's like dumb, but like I feel often like modern day uh, philosophers, I feel like their efforts could be spent in other avenues.
Mhm.
Um, but I've been listening to the Ayn Rand guys a lot, and I really liked Atlas Shrugged, and I listened to the Ayn Rand guys, and we had Yaron Brook on, and I enjoy listening to them talk about philosophy, and I was just sort of interested in maybe hearing how other people, I guess I was just sort of interested in trying to figure out how other people derive their beliefs. And, everyone talks about Nietzsche. I knew nothing about this book when I picked it, other than that a lot of people talk about Nietzsche, and I just figured, let's give it a go.
Okay.
And I guess, it was an interesting choice. I guess, Jack, what were your what were your initial thoughts?
I mean, I've heard of Nietzsche's thought experiments before. I like a lot of them. I'd never read a full book. The first striking thing was that it's written in kind of like stanzas. So each kind of thought has a different number associated with it. And then also it was written in German originally. At least I'm assuming because many of the sentences are very run-on sentences, which is common in German, where they try to make the sentence as long as possible and embed sentences within sentences because that's a sign that you're sophisticated. And since he mentions German so much, I'm just assuming he wrote this in German, but I guess I'm assuming that.
Yeah, I mean, my book opens with I think my book opens with a note from the translator. Uh,
Okay.
so I'm
Yeah,
assuming
because
it was translated from German.
yeah, because I think this went in like the public domain after so many years, so anyone can print this now. Um, but yeah, it's very common in the German language to have very long sentences that make, sound sophisticated. And that's because my wife is a native German speaker. One of the things when she was writing initially was some of her sentences were very long. And I'm like, yo, just like put a period and start a new sentence. But yeah, that's kind of how Nietzsche writes. So
I
where
guess,
should we begin with the title, or where do you want to begin?
I mean, I guess I at one point I had his, if I can go through all my tabs, I mean, maybe just some backdrop on him himself, if I can find the tab that I had. I mean, I was just going to say some generic stuff about him. Let me just pull it up. He apparently was not, from what a lot of people say, a good person, or from what I've heard. Obviously, there's a lot of, I mean, I heard some claims that he was very anti-Semitic. Uh, I feel like you can't really,
Really?
I feel like,
That's very surprising from the book because he talks so highly of the Jews.
yeah, that's just something I heard, but
Huh.
I'm not sure about. I mean, but the sexism I feel like is pretty rampant throughout. He made a
Well, I
lot
guess
of.
what year was it written in? Because that would give some people some context. Because my
Mm,
copy didn't actually have the date of the original publication.
hold up, I can pull this up right now. I mean, it must have been around like 18, I think 1880. Let's see, where's this bibliography? I mean, some of the stuff about him was like just sort of weird.
I do know
Uh,
he was very ill most of his life.
yeah, it
Um,
was some like bizarre. He was like the youngest professor of like philology, which I guess is the study of languages at Basel. And then after like 10 years, he had to quit because of illness. And then it was some insane story that he saw a horse getting like flogged, and 1886 is when Beyond Good and Evil came out.
okay.
Um,
1886.
yeah, he saw a horse getting flogged, and he like ran to the horse and like said like I know your plight, and then the way I heard the story was that caused him to have a mental breakdown, and I assumed that that would like they tried to make it sound like that led to his death, but he died like 10 years after that. So I mean,
Hmm.
it's just like I kind of, I mean, I guess you can take it for what it is. I took it for sort of a silly story, but I guess it is what it is. Uh, he did have this incredible, I feel like he had the women should not be, sorry, women should only be seen quote, something along those lines. That was said at some point in the book. Um, yeah, quite a couple other of those, but. I mean, I guess to start with, sort of like what you were talking about with the language, when I very much struggled understanding what was being said in this book. I don't know if you had that.
So I went like in and out. There were certain sections where I'm like, okay, this is very good. This is very useful. And then there's other sections where I'm just like, there's no coherent idea. I feel like it's so disjointed. It's just a bunch of thoughts. It's
Thoughts?
almost like he's
Yeah,
scribbling thoughts as he's
yeah.
coming up with them. So it's more like a journal. There was one section in particular where it was really just,
Just
it seemed like every line was a different
unjointed
thought. So,
statements. Yeah.
but, I don't know. So like the way I viewed this book, and I think part of I mean, the title is Beyond Good and Evil. A lot of philosophers talk about, and I kind of thought it was going to be like, what is good? What is evil? Because I started to think about that, and maybe this would be a good topic, but like, I don't know how, I mean, I guess I'll just throw it out there. Like, how do you think of like good and evil?
So I feel like that kind of comes to
Because
the initial like I don't know like quarter of the book is this topic
what
like the prejudice of philosophers
Well, I would
of like
say I would say this book is not about what is good and what is evil. It's about what is good for, or what do these ideas serve? Like, and are they serving you? That I think is the whole crux of the book. And that
Yes.
that
Yeah.
and that is basically why it's called Beyond Good and Evil. So
Right.
if someone asked you what is good, what is evil, how would you describe, like, what would your thought be?
Right. Well, so like I feel like it comes back to everything is ingrained in how you view things based essentially on your culture. So like, right?
Well,
So like I
I started to think about it. So like so let me just throw out a statement like killing someone. Like I think most people jump to the idea of like, okay, that is bad.
well, it depends the
But
context.
right, it depends on the context. So if you're protecting someone, and I remember back from my philosophy class in college that I took pass fail, like there's this example where I think it was like a train and you could like divert the train to kill like one person that's stranded on a track versus,
Five
a
people.
dozen people or something.
Yeah.
Um, or like if someone is storming into your house and about to attack one of your family members. So there's context like, okay, so like killing someone in general might be bad, but with the context, it could be warranted and it might not be deemed evil. So like that was like one thing. Yeah. So like the context it matters. And then also like on the good side, like, okay, like if I, um, give money to someone, someone might say, yeah, that's good. But what if like you find out I stole the money or like the money came from bad operation? Like, okay, well then it's kind of like more of a gray area. So I think that's kind of what I was thinking about when the good and evil aspects got brought up. Because I thought he was gonna kind of go into that, but he didn't really. Um,
Yeah.
but those are my thoughts.
And so I think the sort of the crux of this is that he's saying that there is no like absolute truth on like objective, I guess, morality. So like if something's good or something's bad, but it's all like caked in. It's all caked into essentially your culture or like what you're brought up with. That's how you derive what is, morally good or morally bad. And I'm sort of bringing this back to the beginning of the book. The initial part is I feel like he's railing against all of his previous philosophers in this section, like the prejudice of the philosopher, like the bias of the philosopher. It's it sort of starts with I think the comment is like the will of the truth or just seeking everyone's seeking truth in the beginning, right? But he's
Yes.
saying that all these philosophers have all these baked in assumptions that they don't account for. So it's like obviously in so and a lot of I listened to a lot of analysis on this book, and sort of a lot of it goes back to I think one of the best examples I heard was if someone says, I'm going on a noble quest, like what does that mean to you?
You're asking me.
I'm asking you, yeah, what does that mean to you?
Um, well, I know in the back part of the book, he talks about like the noble man kind of senses the value or puts the value on his own, and it's not value inflicted upon outside people or outside views. So if you told me, and maybe I can articulate this better now that I've read this book, but like if you told me I'm going on a noble quest, I would think that it is a quest that I personally find valuable. And it's simply that.
Okay. So like the point of that is the word noble is derived from nobility, like the ruling class at the time when like the language was sort of being, you know, with like it's like the noble class. So it's inherently viewed as good. But like
Okay.
it's the characteristics of nobility are then just assumed to be good. So and this goes back to like, you're wealthy, you're free, you're sort of opulent. So these things are viewed to be good just because that was how it was viewed at the time. That's not an absolute truth though. That's just from that perspective, I guess.
Mhm.
So he's saying like all these my interpretation is that according to him, all these philosophers in their pursuit of truth, they have these baked in ideas that kind of sully their thinking. So like it's that old adage like garbage in, garbage out. Like if you can't look to find an objective truth if you're starting from something that's not objective. I guess
Mhm.
the example I have down is this from Descartes, who he talks about in the book. This quote, "I think, therefore I am," and then he says like, "Well, you're assuming there's an I. You're
Mhm.
assuming that I think, and then well, maybe it's the thinking. Maybe the thinking is what causes the I, or what is an I? I mean, I don't know. It just becomes somewhat, to me, it becomes somewhat semantical.
Yeah, semantics, right? Yeah. No, but I get yeah. So you're basically saying there's just essentially there's bias involved.
Yes, he's
Um,
he's claiming that all of these philosophers have bias in their thinking. And then there was this is just a quote I wrote down. Each past philosopher has involuntarily and is an unconsciously memoir of the author to justify his moral prejudice, which he baptizes as the truth. So he's saying each philosopher has just unknowingly to himself put in his own biases, and then he is looked to justify those and call them the truth. That's what I have written down.
yeah, truth. I mean, that's another tangent we could go. I mean, truth is a touchy thing, I guess. Like even stuff that sounds simple or on the surface seems obvious. Like two plus two is four. Well, two plus two is not always four.
Wait,
If
wait, wait.
you what's that?
How is two plus two not always four?
Well, if you were working in like they call them modulars or modulus. So like this is the idea of if you're in mod three, like whatever number it corresponds to the remainder after you divide. So four mod three is one because when you divide four, like four divided by three is like one with a remainder of one. So like it, so two plus two in that case is one. It's not
What?
four.
Whoa, 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 whoa. What?
This is from like a modern algebra class, but you can check it. It's like, I mean, it's used all the time. Like if you wanted to every third item in Excel, you could, there's a function called mod. So you can just, so it basically will number them. So like, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. So, um, that's just an example. Like even things that seem obvious are not always so obvious. It once again, it depends on the context.
Well, I mean, okay. So I guess truth, I was thinking about this a lot as well. So like, there are some things I feel like this is sort of getting into like this topic that's kind of called like objectivism versus like subjectivism, right? Right, like things are dependent. He's saying in a lot of these cases things are subjective, correct?
Mhm.
But like
Mhm.
there are objective truths.
Oh, are there?
If you jump off a building, what's going to happen? With no, yeah,
I guess it depends if there's, something catching me right below, maybe.
you're going to fall though. Like
Yeah, if
gravity
you're,
isn't gravity. I
yeah.
think gravity. There are natural constants. There are natural laws that are, I would say, objective truths that everyone agrees to, unless they have mental issues.
Okay.
And I guess that's just sort of how I was when I was thinking about this, that's kind of how I was going about it. Like if there's some threshold of people that agree, like, you know, there are things that I think people should that can be agreed upon as objective truths. Like there are things I was thinking about chemistry that are like always true. Uh,
Mhm.
there are things in like physics that will always be true. Things in I don't I didn't really I didn't understand the example you gave about two plus two at all. So I would have said before this there were things in math that would always be considered true. But then there are things that are subjective. You're right. Like for an election, who is the better candidate? Like how you could poll 100 people and you could get, you know, split answers.
Sure.
Uh, but yeah, so I think his point in this was that a lot of these philosophers who are they're looking for truth. And I think his point is that you can never find objective truth. Uh, I guess. I guess, do you have any other thoughts on that, or did you disagree with that or agree with that?
Not not really. I gotta be frank. I didn't really like that first chapter.
Fair enough. Yeah, it was not I
I
guess
mean,
like
I mean, the only other thing I guess I would say is that I mean, I wrote down society turns to commanding versus obeying, and real life is only a question of strong versus weak wills. So I feel like this is like a theme throughout the book, kind of this commanding or obeying, kind of made me think of some of the assumptions in the Stiglitz book where you're either being exploited or doing the exploiting. Um, and that it's kind of just like dog eat dog and you know the strongest will prevail.
so that's kind of touching on I think one of the main points of this book was this topic or this phrase, the will to power. Uh and I guess I don't know, did you have a I guess how did you think about that? Sort of, I guess you sort of just said it. If you just want to like reiterate that maybe.
um so he's basically, I mean, I think it was actually later in the book where he tried to remind the reader on how you know nation states, um cities back in the day formed, and it's normally
Through force.
strong-willed
Right.
people either dominating weaker will or maybe perhaps more peaceful, or people that are accepting or kind of just trusting that the people infiltrating are going to be okay. But at the end of the day, you got to remember a lot of these formations of these countries were brute force, like brutal um, acts of force, acts of will, and there's inevitably some sort of hierarchy in the systems. Um, I don't know if I did a great job explaining that, but yeah, but basically these hierarchies form over time.
Yeah, so I have it as the main driving force in humans. Can be described as self-determination. Like you're setting out your will to determine like essentially what you want. One's will onto one's surrounding. Um, can I guess I have written down concedes with egoism.
Okay. I mean, another
Uh,
interesting part with like people being like strong willed is that he did bring up, and I thought this was a good point that um there was a quote, independence is a privilege of the strong. And I thought that was an interesting way to look at it. And he also included the people that are at least trying or attempting to acquire independence have it is basically a sign that they are a strong individual,
yes.
even if you are attempting it, because it could fail dramatically.
Right.
So there's no guarantees in life, and if you set forth and are not afraid to fail, basically you're strong-willed.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it just I sort of I have written down like ties to Nazism. Uh, I guess a lot of people say that he influenced the Nazis, uh, which I guess you could kind of see. But then I have another note written down that it's the misinterpretation of the words Kraft versus Macht, where Kraft is force or strength and Macht is power or might. So I was reading some people saying like he was misinterpreted and like the Nazis like took him out of context, but I
I
mean
mean,
I don't really think so, right?
I don't quite understand how this book at least would be. I mean, this was very pro-Jew. I don't
Right, but the
understand.
the will to power, like the actual ideal of the will to power, like taking.
But he even admitted the Jews were the most competent people in Europe, and that if they wanted to, they could dominate Europe if they wanted. He said that.
Yeah. He did say that. I'm just saying there was some analysis that was linking him as an influence to the Nazis, and I think it's not the parts where he's talking highly about the Jews. I think it's the will to power, like the idea of the will to power.
Uh-huh. It gets to the point, I think maybe, and maybe this is what they're talking about, is that when the, quote unquote oppressed have had enough, basically they need to change the rules of the game. Like if the people on the bottom are feeling, they're um what's the word he kept using? Indignant. If these indignant people, so they're annoyed at a perception of an unfair treatment, so they perceive Jews as, unfairly benefited somehow, then they can just, okay, well, there's more of us. Let's just make them, let's just change the rules and make them be the bottom. So maybe that is kind of what, because he was kind of describing those dynamics of at some point the people on the bottom, like if they keep getting screwed over, and this gets to the point of beyond being good, because if you're just obedient, just for the sake of being obedient, it might not be helping you. So if at some point you're saying like, yo, this is not working for me, like F this, we're gonna revolt basically, and we're gonna change the rules of the system. So like I guess I could see it from that perspective, like, okay, let's just change the rules and get rid of the Jews.
Okay, I'm not. I'm talking. It's the concept of essentially, you know, asserting your will onto others. Not nothing that was what I'm talking about.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, yeah, like
Okay.
there's more of us, there's less of them. We're gonna enforce our just brute will or brute force on the minority.
So you talked about you sort of mentioned the oppressed and oppressor thing. So I thought there were a lot of I thought of that a lot as well. So he brings up these terms like master morality and slave morality.
Hmm.
Uh, so I thought it was really interesting because the slave essentially what he's saying is like the slave morality is being derived from Christianity. So like when Christianity was on the bottom. Uh, and it took on these attributes of like piety, humility, uh, abstinence. Where do I have all my notes?
Yeah, he said like I think like
Abstinence,
always like
humility,
fasting.
right, fasting. So it's like everything in opposition to what like in this term, the master morality is, which would be like, you know, self-indulgence, like a lot of like sex, a lot of power. But another point I had was that that those morals were adopted to essentially make the slaves feel good about themselves for not having a lot of stuff. And to say that, this is really what you should be striving for if you have these qualities, like you may not have a good life in this life, but at least in the afterlife, you will be like you'll get more, right? You'll reach like heaven.
Yeah, I mean, I
Well,
was reading it as he was very against basically organized religion, and that religion was just a tool to control the
control.
masses
Yes.
and not to overthrow the people at the top.
Well, I think, yeah, he's definitely viewing, I felt like he definitely is viewing religion as something that keeps people weak. Like it's
Yeah.
controlling them because he's viewing like the priest and like the warrior as like the top echelons, is like the warrior having the original, like, I guess, master morality, and the priest keeping all of the like peons in check. Uh,
Hmm.
because he is the one doing the controlling. But what I thought was interesting is that uh yeah, I mean, this kind of goes into the oppressed oppressor like dynamic that we're seeing today. And I feel like it's sort of interesting because like the least from almost like I feel like it's kind of a reversal again because I feel like the least religious people today are the ones that like always look at this oppressed oppressor dynamic. Like I mean, I hang out with a lot of like very religious people and they never like I never hear them bring up this stuff. But the victim mentality stuff is always coming from I feel like people that are very anti-religious, which I just it's nothing really to do with the book. I just sort of thought it was an interesting point of something that I observed.
That is interesting.
Uh,
Because that would be counter to what he's kind of trying to lay out, because he's saying the religion is kind of,
keeping people down.
but I guess, I guess at the end of the day, what is religion actually? Religion is kind of just a community rallying around kind of a belief, or
Yeah, but
a because I think some people might consider certain sports having religious aspects. Um,
but it's a community, and I think that's like the big
uh-huh.
takeaway is that it's putting the needs of like the group above the needs of the individual. So like, and if you're doing that, you are not able to exert like your full will. Like you're not self-determining yourself to your, I guess to go on into this term Ubermensch or the above man.
Hmm.
Uh,
So, maybe the people that don't have like a formal religion, or say they don't believe in it, are just latching on to a group because they feel left out. So maybe that's kind of why they're gravitating towards this group think. Maybe it's something in, it probably it's ingrained in us, right? We're kind of like these tribal type of beings. We kind of like being in groups.
Right. No, yeah. I actually also on top of like the oppressed oppressor, like when I was reading this, I felt like I felt like I was getting a lot of I was reading a lot of like almost from like Atlas Shrugged, like a lot of her type of altruism, her altruism like versus like the individual, where you know in altruism you're supposed to put the needs of others above yourself and you're supposed to sacrifice for everyone else, and you're supposed to like give yourself to them, which is like kind of, I guess, in the way he frames this, kind of what I was viewing Christianity is you're supposed to sacrifice so others can kind of have things,
Hmm.
but you're supposed to not live kind of for yourself.
Hmm.
Uh, but I guess like she, in like at least in how she defines like the individual, or at least in Atlas Shrugged, it's like you're not supposed to the the divergence I felt like was I feel like uh Ayn Rand makes it clear that like you're not supposed to like hurt others on your way to like leading your best life. I feel like that statement's pretty clear in her work, where kind of in this philosophy and like this will to power, I don't get that impression. I get that the way he's writing about this is that you can, you should exert yourself on all others.
I don't think he's really saying like you should do it. I think he's just saying because like that to me is more like the Machiavellian, like the Prince. Like in that book, I felt like he's saying like you need to like this is how you control territory. This is how you get in with the people that you're going to be controlling. Like this is how you inflict your will on others. I actually don't get this sense from this book. Like I don't think he's saying like you should do that. I think he's saying like you need to acknowledge that this is what people have done in the past to construct these countries and nations.
Okay,
Um,
maybe I just felt like it was implied. I don't know. I sort of was getting that.
I think he's
But
just.
maybe
I
not.
think I thought I got more of the sense he's just trying to describe some of the dynamics that exist.
Okay.
Not necessarily saying you should, you know, kind of, I guess, force your will on others, but um, um,
But isn't that like kind of implied? Like if that's your main, like inherently, like you have to do that though. Like
why
maybe, what do you mean? Why?
why do you have to inflict your will on others to have a good life?
I mean, to get things in life, you inherently are inflicting your will on others.
Mm, I mean, I guess it depends. Like, I guess it depends what you mean by like inflict your will. He brings up the point that he's definitely anti-socialist. I would say that he's clearly he's not for everyone getting the same because he talks
Well,
about
yeah.
to have a good life or to have a rare life you have to be rare.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
so that is one thing, but I wouldn't exactly say that everyone in a power position has quote unquote inflicted their will on others. Like
Okay, but like,
I view it more as that they are. But I mean, some of them have. Some of them have done what most people would say are nasty things to get to the top, but others have just provided a lot of value for a lot of people.
sure, that's true. I
And
guess
I
to
don't consider providing a lot of value for a lot of people inflicting your will on others. I mean, I guess if you want to
okay,
call it that, but
sure. I guess this is yet again semantical. I guess to your point that he's anti-socialist, I think it's like hilarious because most of the people that I hear talk about him are like almost communists, at least in modern day like internet like
hmm
talk, which is like wild. Like, and I felt like that was wild as I was going through this because, like you said, like it's like the opposite. I feel like all these people that like talk about him so highly, he, in many regards, is totally against what they stand for. At least in that regard.
yeah, because
Um,
I would say that that is not really a gray area in this book. From when I read it, I was like, okay, he's definitely anti-socialist.
right, and I feel like that kind of takes into like the person he's it's the be. Hold up, there's a I don't have it. I don't have it written down. But it's like the person I feel like he's looking for is the person that can it is the exception, the person that can go beyond, like it's the beyond, the person that can go beyond looking at things as just good and evil and sort of untie themselves from, I guess, some of these assumptions. And what do I have written down? I had a quote. Yeah, calls for people. I had a quote down, Ren. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, so individuals should strive to create their own moral systems beyond the limitations of conventional morality. I feel like that's the type of person he's looking for, and that is, yes, an exceptional, I guess in his eyes, an exceptional person.
I mean, I guess the things that come to mind when you say that, like, so, like, what groups of people would you say are questioning the quote unquote like good morals of today's society?
Well, I feel like you have to question it. I mean, I question the morals of like our society. I question the
Sure,
morals of a lot of other societies regularly.
but what about ours?
I mean, ours, I don't really question
What about like
I do.
taxes? Well, what about
Sure.
taxes?
Taxes, I guess taxes I do. I would call that a law, not a moral.
Uh-huh. Because like I kind of view like Bitcoiners a little bit in that realm. Like they're
Sure.
kind of
Okay.
questioning
Well, it's questioning the
the
norm.
they're questioning the morality of, you know, the monetary system. The
Okay.
monetary
Yeah.
system,
Sure.
their claim is it's theft, and it is. I mean, like inflation is theft. I don't care what.
Well, inflation is taxes.
Inflation is a silent theft. You're stealing purchasing power from the people. I mean that's the way I view it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think most
I view it
Bitcoiners.
as a form of taxation, I guess.
Okay, so okay. Do you view taxation as theft?
Not all taxation. No.
Okay, I would agree with that. Not all taxation is theft, but I do consider inflation kind of. I would say that is theft.
I would say it's definitely dishonest.
Yeah, and
Because
I think this would be, and we should be able to. One of the things in this whole book is like questioning the morals, like questioning the status quo. Is what we've been told is a good moral? You know, pay your taxes, pay. You know, you should be, you know, obedient to authority to do go along with this idea, and so like we should be allowed to question what we're being told, and
sure.
that's and I think that's what I mean. Bitcoiners definitely come to mind because that seems
Okay.
to be an extreme kind of thing that has come up recently.
I,
But
I guess to your previous point of theft first, the reason I view it as taxation is because the government will you'll get inflation instead of an increase in taxes,
okay,
right? Like so, because if they need more money, there's only one or two ways to do it. They can either raise taxes to actually get the money, or they can artificially print it, which causes inflation.
hmm
So I view it more as a form of taxation than of theft. But most taxes I view, I would say most taxes are, I mean, I think technically, couldn't you view all taxes that don't go to constitutional protected like things in the Constitution as sort of theft? I sort of think
yeah,
there's an argument. I think there's an
yeah,
argument for that for
yeah,
sure.
that's the point. We're supposed to question what the quote unquote good morals are. Um,
I guess like I guess when I think of morals, like I don't really do you think of it in terms of like the law though? So like there are legal I view things as like something may be legal, but I wouldn't say it's right. Just like something is illegal, but not necessarily wrong.
right, I agree.
So like don't you think you should sort of separate, morals from like a legal system? Because
Um,
like it was legal to own slaves, but you wouldn't say that is right, but that was legal.
it was legal.
But you wouldn't say it's not right. It's definitely wrong.
Um, I mean, that's it, at the time, like you always have to view it in the time. I mean, I don't know. It's impossible to say how I would have felt, but like and I brought this up before,
Oh,
but like owning a
sure.
pet in a a couple hundred years, that it could be viewed as this is incredibly cruel, and how could anyone do this? How could anyone enslave an animal and use them for their own personal enjoyment?
Okay, I understand. I'm saying like you right now can look back and understand like why people own slaves, but you can still say you think in today's standards that is wrong, but it
Sure.
was legal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I guess that's my question. Like I feel uh I guess like when I think of uh, I don't know I feel like the I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is like I feel like the examples are all coming into like legality almost. I guess the
Right,
taxes.
but the point is the question what we're being told to obey. If if the he's kind of saying, these, Christian values, and I mean he's very anti these Christian values, like, forgiving your enemy, just
Right. I
obeying
disagree with that.
obeying what you've been told, and
Oh,
part of
yeah.
what we're being told are the laws. So we
Okay.
need to we
That's
need to question that.
sure, sure. That's fair. That's fair. I mean,
Um,
I definitely disagree with the taxes for the most part.
yeah, I just got, a bill in the mail for like $2,500 just for my winter taxes on a house that's not even worth 60 grand. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, taxes. I mean, I've routinely said this, but my little rinky-dink houses in Michigan all have a higher tax bill than my much nicer houses in Nashville and Birmingham or in
Yeah,
Alabama, which is just insane.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, and then it leads to all these other problems, like because now I have to hire an accountant. I feel like to handle all this stuff.
True. Yeah, there's all these added operational
Unmentioned
expenses.
cost, right? It's just
Yeah.
silly.
Yeah, most people don't bring in the operational expenses when they're doing their underwriting. Um, let's see here. Okay, here's a talking point. Do you think we give he's basically saying we give too much respect to the elderly and women. He
Well,
feels
yeah,
he feels
there's
women have forgotten to fear men.
yeah he obviously had he had some issues with women.
Well, I don't, okay, so I mean, yes, he probably did.
What do you mean
Um,
probably did? He obviously he had some. I mean, I have a quote written down. Women should be seen,
mhm.
or maybe this is not. I don't think I wrote
But
this
that's
down.
funny because, like our sister just said, men are meant to be seen, not heard. This last week, how the tides have turned in the language. But I think there is something to be said to questioning, because I think a lot of cultures do have this respect the elders. Um, and I would say normally I try to respect the elders, but he's kind of questioning, like, should we? Like, is that valid?
Well, okay.
Should
There's yet again. This is somewhat semantical. Like, when you say respect, do you mean like treat them well,
should
or
you obey them?
well, of course not. Not always.
Okay, I think that's kind of what he's getting at.
I
Because
mean,
he's
like,
kind of talking about how men have started treating women like, very, beautiful flowers and fragile beings. And he's kind of saying, no, no, that's not how reality is. And I think he's trying to paint a similar picture for the elderly.
I mean, with the elderly, like, there is something to be said for there's something to be said for like people that have lived more that are giving you advice. But on the same note, like I feel like the best advice, some of the best advice I heard was you should not take advice from people who are not in a position you want to be in, or at least
Right.
someone, right? So like, you shouldn't take advice, like in real estate, from someone that is rented their entire life because they don't know anything. It doesn't matter how old they are.
Right. Exactly.
Uh,
I
so
think that's kind of what he's getting at, honestly.
like anything, it's case dependent. Like there are some obviously, I mean, you should always treat people, unless they show that they don't deserve to be treated well, you should treat them with respect and dignity, but you don't have to listen to them. Like you don't have to take their
Mhm.
advice. Uh, if they
I
have,
think I think he's kind of saying people need to earn your respect. Like that's kind of that's how I read it.
okay.
And that you shouldn't just give people, I guess, favorable treatment just because they're a woman or just because they're old. That's how I read it, at least.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. That's just how I read it.
Well, he did bring up that point that I think he said people are more likely to help someone that they find attractive than unattractive, even, and then like consider themselves altruistic. But it's like, are
Hmm.
you really altruistic, or are you just trying to help someone you find attractive?
Hmm. Sure.
Which is, yeah, without a doubt true, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, those are really all I guess, the main points I had.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know. Do you have anything else?
Um, I don't know. Like, so I guess in terms of like actually going forward, like, what are you going to take from this book? And what can how can the listeners use some of this information in their everyday life?
I guess I just had this one last tidbit written down. It's that in like this moral period when this like slave morality is being derived, I have written down actions were judged based on their consequences, and now actions are judged based on their origins. So it's like basing something on their consequences versus basing something on their intent. Uh,
Yeah, he
which
was saying back in the day, like in history, it used to be
all that
just
mattered was
because
consequences.
yeah, and Andy Duke would call that resulting. Because like normally, if you ask people, "What's the best decision you made?" Normally, they're gonna say something that had a favorable outcome.
Outcome. Yeah.
But that's not really the way you should look at decision making. You should separate the decision from the result.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and he kind of brought that up.
What would I say people should take away from this book?
Yeah.
Honestly, I have no idea. Uh, I mean, just that like there are a lot of uh, I mean, yet again, I don't really think there's a black and white. Like some things, I kind of felt like at times he was trying to make an argument for subjectivism, which I don't agree with wholeheartedly. Like I think there are objective truths. But like anything else, I think it's dependent on the case. Like I think there are times where things are obviously subjective, and I think there are times when things are objective. I think it's just important to be aware of that. I think it's important to be aware of your own, you need to, I think, sort of do some introspection and like determine what your own like held prejudice or biases are when you're trying to derive things. Because I felt like that was the essentially the main part of I think like first quarter, first third of the book is that most of these philosophers are essentially working backwards from what they already believe to derive their own beliefs. Um, I'm blanking on the terminology for that right
Is that
now.
like confirmation bias?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, like yeah, that's how I was interpreting this, that they all
Uh-huh.
just, they all just were undergoing confirmation bias. Um, Man, I don't really know what you could take. I mean, the parts on, I found the points on sort of the morality of Christianity, how it arose, interesting. I don't really know how you would tie that into your everyday life, I guess. I don't know. Do you have any?
I mean, I think what I'll take away from this is like kind of his idea. I mean, you asked like in the very beginning, like the noble quest, but like what is like a noble man? And like he's kind of saying like a noble, like the noble or master morality involves like determining the value. Like don't use outside people to tell you what the value is. Like so basically kind of almost have blinders on to what other people are valuing or how they see you, just kind of compete against yourself. Like you determine what you want to do, what the value of that action is, and just do it. And don't care about what other people are doing. Like have
Yep.
your own set of
Morals.
values. Yeah.
Yeah. Create individuals should strive to create their own moral systems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'll take away from this.
Okay.
From Beyond Good and Evil. So, okay, so with that, please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind, a great review or a recommendation on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. For the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. Allie Bear, for the next episode. Now we are going to have Cheryl Atkinson on, who was the author for
Follow the
Follow the
signs.
Signs. But our next book is going to be From Hamas to America by Mossab Hassan Youssef and James Beckett. And this is his story of defying terror, facing the unimaginable, and finding redemption in the land of opportunity. So that should be a fun read.
That it
Um,
should.
so I guess it's been a good episode and talk to you next time.
Next time.